From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is the Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
An old, tired-looking dog wandered into the yard of a retiree's home, and the dog didn't have any tags on it. He had a collar, but no tags, and the retiree, the gentleman, could tell that from the look of the dog, he was well-fed and had a clean body, obviously had a home. And this stray dog, however, followed the man into his home and went over and onto the sofa and laid down, fell asleep. And the guy had some dogs of his own, but they didn't seem to mind, and this man didn't seem to mind, and so he let him have a nap, and about an hour later, the dog got up and went to the door and kind of gave the message he wanted to leave, and so he let him out and left. Next day, the dog was back and resumed that same procedure. Wanted to get in, got in, went on the sofa, took about an hour's nap, left. And so this went on for several weeks. And so finally the gentleman, the man, pinned a note on the collar of the dog. And the note said, "Every afternoon, your dog comes to my house for a nap. I don't mind, but want to be sure that it's okay with you." So the dog left, and the next day it came back and it had a different note attached to the collar. And the note said, "He lives in a home with 10 children. He's trying to catch up on his sleep. May I come with him tomorrow?" So I have to confess, my wife and I have been babysitting the last 2 days our grandchild, just one. It's not quite 2 yet. And if I look like a tired old dog after one, we are really enjoying this child. But she is a storm. Following her around and all, it's a blast. It's a blast. But anyway, I know most of us don't have 10 children like this one lady that was talking about the dog that had to go get some rest. But, we do, I think, have challenges, situations, circumstances that come our way. That's what life is about. And all of us, I think, are attempting to do the best we can to cope with various aspects of life and the little challenges and the big challenges that come along. And some of them are our own, some of them are those of our loved ones, our friends, and we go through some of that with them as they go through their own. And so there can be struggles, there can be conflicts, there can be problems, as we call them, that come along. It's not easy to stay in peace and maintain an internal sense of harmony and well-being at times. The struggles and conflicts can be both external, things happening, or they're brought then to be internal as well. But it's important, I think, to grasp that basically we are here as souls to learn and grow. And so the way that we learn and grow is through the opportunity of having different challenges that come along. And in every challenge that comes along, there's a truth to be lived. There's a truth to be learned. There is something to be applied. We have a spiritual toolbox if we will learn to open it and apply the things that we have learned thus far. That's part of our own soul growth, is to always remember, well, what is it that I have in my spiritual toolbox that I need to pull out and apply for this situation that's come my way, large or small. I think it's important that we also always remember, one of the teachings that we teach here is that we're more than a body. We have a body, but we're not our body. We have a mind, we're not our mind. We have thoughts, we're not our thoughts. We're more than that. We're always to be in the more that you are than some of those thoughts and some of those emotions and some of those things that come along. Our soul's purpose is to evolve spiritually into the image and likeness that we have been created to be. And our soul's purpose is therefore to be a light in the world, as Jesus called us to be, and to rise above the darkness that may descend upon us, around us, or even in the world. And darkness is an interesting word. It's sometimes used. It's actually found in the Bible various times as well. Jesus even referred to darkness. And darkness is actually said to be sometimes ignorance. ignorance. Now, that's a heavy word to lay on yourself when the darkness descends upon us, but keep in mind that the word ignorance has the word ignore in it. And so basically, what is it that we're ignoring? What truth are we ignoring? What dimension of love and goodness are we ignoring? What opportunity to grow are we ignoring? What truth of God? So darkness can be ignorance. It can be certainly negativity, separation from God. It's a fear, and all the offshoots of fear that we know, because everything really comes from fear, whether it's greed or hate or selfishness or negative judgments or distrust or unforgiveness. And all of these things are really rooted in fear. And so to simplify, it's been said, and you've heard and learned, that basically there are only two choices that we have to make, and it's either love or fear. We either let fear win, or we remember that love is what we are, and love is what we're here for, and what we've come really to demonstrate. And so it's love that carries the light, of course. Fear is darkness. And when we are in fear, basically, the aura of our life energy, the frequency that sends light into the world, dims. And so that's what is really being talked about. You can really qualify a person sometimes as being radiant. And you encounter people that have a radiance, and literally they do. And then you can encounter people that, not to be judgmental, but we go through things and a person can be really downtrodden with a situation and a problem. And that's okay, that's part of the human experience. But we also want to see and know, even for that person that you may see, that they're really a light, and that's who they really are. And we always get back to being a light once again, of course. But whenever fear has you in its clutches, you can be assured that you're really not able to be your real self, and you're not being yourself. Jesus taught this idea when he said, the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is sound, or meaning is single being on truth and on love and on your true identity as a child of God, then your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is not sound and is separate from that truth, then your whole body will be full of darkness. And so he's really talking about vibrations, energies, frequencies, all of these kinds of things. And so he's also saying that essentially we all come over and over again in our life to a fork in the road. Whatever it is we may face during the events of any day or the sequence of things that we face in a lifetime, we come to a fork in the road over and over again as to whether we're going to be showing up as love and the light of love, or whether or not we're going to be dimmed by the darknesses of fear. It's a choice, and it's part of our spiritual growth to evolve to the place where we choose right. You know, Yogi Berra was the old Yankee catcher in Major League Baseball, and one of his yogiisms was, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. You can't always know what yogi meant. I don't know if he meant if you saw a fork lying in the road, take it. We don't know about yogi, but anyway, you can't give your power away to circumstances. You can't make circumstances more powerful than God. And you can't let darkness and fear overcome the love and the light of God that is inherent in you. You know, sometimes there's a sense of, you know, living life and allowing it to be fun. Some things when we were children, you know, we would do them just for the fun of it, right? Remember that term? I did it just for the fun of it. It wasn't that we did something bad, but I mean, it's like, the example I give is first time we had a swimming hole, and on the edge of it was this great big tree, and there was hanging from it a very thick rope, and there was a knot on the end of it, and we'd swing out over the water. And sometimes we wouldn't let go, and we'd swing back, and then we'd swing out over the water. But eventually we would let go, and into the water we would go. And, you know, I didn't want to do it. My friend says, do it for the fun of it. It's the fun, you know. So eventually you do, and you have the fun. I'm here. I made it through. I swam. So there are things like that. But in addition to what about, you know, doing it for the fun of it, what about doing it for the love of it? You know, to being who you are and being kind and being generous and being one who chooses to come from a loving energy and doing it for the love of it, for the love of life, for the love of being it, you know. We all do things sometimes every day that has some element of sameness to it. We get regimented to some extent in the course of our life. And yet it can become so new and so vital and so much more alive if we set the intention that at every fork of the road, I'm going to choose to be a light. I'm going to do it for the love of it. That's a great thing to incorporate, and it has many payoffs. Of course, because God is love, and whenever you're into love, then you're into God, and you're entering into God, and you're entering into the love energy of God, and you feel connected. And it's much better if we can be proactive in that way and intentional in that way, as opposed to waiting for something good to happen, waiting for somebody to be nice to us, waiting for this or that to give cause or reason to be loving. All right, to be proactive and initiate is a powerful thing. Jesus said, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. And then he says, continue in my love. Keep it going. Keep it going. This is what it's about. And then he talks a little bit, and this is all in the Gospel of John, chapter 15. And then he talks a little bit more about the commandments and keeping the commandments. And then he says, these things I have spoken to you, and that my joy may be in you, and that my joy, or your joy, may be full. So it's like for the fun of it. You know, that's where fun and joy and that energy is able to be lived and felt. And then you get to verse 17, and he says, this I command you, not would you, pretty please, do this? I command you, because that's who you are. That's what you're about. I command you to be your true self, you know, to love one another. And the happiest people are those who are able to do that and be proactive in love and do it for the love of it. There's a wonderful story by Art Buchwald. Art Buchwald was an American humorist. He had a long-running column in the Washington Post, and it was syndicated in many newspapers around the country. And he, in 1982, actually, he was a Pulitzer Prize winner. He passed on in 2007. But he tells a story about he and a friend when they went to New York City, and they were in a cab, and wherever it is that they were going, once they got there, they got out of the cab, and his friend, Art Buchwald's friend, says to the cabbie, you know, thank you for the ride. You did a superb job of driving. And the taxi driver was kind of stunned. He's a New York taxi driver. He said, are you a wise guy or something, you know? Are you a wise guy? And they said, no, I admire the way, you know, you were able to keep your cool in heavy traffic. And so the driver said, oh, okay, thank you, and went on. And Art Buchwald said, what was that all about? And his friend says, well, I'm trying to bring love back to New York. He says, I think it's the only thing that will save the city. And Art asked, well, how can one man save New York? And his friend explained, well, it's not just one man. He said, I believe that I made that taxi driver's day. And suppose he has 20 fares today. He's going to be nice to those 20 fares now because someone was nice to him. And those 20 fares are going to, in turn, be, you know, kinder to the people that they encounter, whether it be their fellow workers, employees, waiters, shopkeepers, whatever, their families. And eventually, that goodwill could spread to at least 1,000 people. And Art Buchwald says, but you're depending on that taxi driver to pass the goodwill on, you know. And he said, no, I'm not depending on it. I'm aware that the system is not foolproof, so I might deal with 10 different people today. This is his friend talking. And he said, and if out of those 10, you know, I can make 3 of them really happy, move them into the frequency and the vibration of that, you know, then eventually I can directly influence, perhaps, the attitudes of 3,000 people. Things for every one person that keeps going, and affects 1,000 people. And Art said, sounds good on paper, but I'm not sure it works in practice. And his friend said, well, you know, nothing is lost if it doesn't, because tomorrow there will be new opportunities to connect with new taxi drivers and new people, because everywhere you go, you meet really others, and you meet yourself. And Art said, "You're some kind of a nut." Anyway, they walked from there down the street, and they came to a project, a building project that the guys were working on. They were having lunch. There were 5 guys sitting there having lunch. And his friend went up and started talking to him and complimenting them and what a wonderful building it was and all that. And he then said to Art, well, when those men digest my words, they're going to feel better about it. And somehow the city of New York will benefit from their happiness. And the most important thing is never become discouraged about the impact that you can make. And just then a woman walked past them, looked like maybe they guessed it was a school teacher maybe. And anyway, his friend winked at her. And Art Buchwald caught and saw that, and he said, "You winked at that woman." And he said, "Yes, I know, and if she's a school teacher, her class will be in for a fantastic day." So anyway, that's the story that Art Buchwald tells, and it was really a lesson to him that a friend was making on the impact that you can make, and seeing how you can do it for the love of it, and love is a powerful energy. And of course, Teilhard de Chardin, the great paleontologist, and priest, has that great quote that you may have heard, which I love. And he says, "The day will come when after harnessing space, the winds, the tides, and gravitation, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And on that day, for the second time in the history of the world, we shall have discovered fire." So, have you discovered the fire in you? There's a fire that longs to burn. It's the fire called love. It wants to be expressed. It's what you came here for. We need to learn to love. And it can be a continual fork in the road choosing between love and fear. There's a lot to fear in this world at this time, if you want to. There's the global warming or the ice cap melting. There's the damaging storms and tornadoes and earthquakes and hurricanes. There's crime that's reported on. There's terrorism that's out there. There's wars going on in various parts of the world. There's Syria. There's North Korea to be concerned about if you want to. There's droughts. There's famine. There's people dying of starvation in various parts of the world. There's air pollution, water pollution. There's the economy. There's craziness in politics. You didn't come here to hear that, did you? But the world is in a mixture of change and happening. And this is not just in our time. It's been in every time. And every time in history, there have been things happening. And so the world is not coming to an end. But the world as we have known it it's changing. And how are we adapting and adjusting to the change? Are we losing ourselves, or remembering who we really are in the midst of all of these things that are happening? The fork in the road that we all come to is basically whether we're going to go the way of love or we're going to go the way of fear. And if we're going to go the way of love, there is a certain thing that you have to understand, and that is to trust. You have to trust in the big picture that everything is going to be okay, that there are solutions, there are answers, that the light is winning, even when it doesn't appear to be. Something good underneath it all is happening. And basically, the thing that you have to do is, what am I doing? What am I about? What is my contribution in this life? And so, at every fork of the road, you have that choice. And you're here to carry the light. That's why you came into this world, is to carry the light into it. That's what you've been called to do. And so, if we're going to, again, be a being of love, and make the choice of love, it really requires that we learn trust and notice what our fears are, surrender to the highest that is in us, and live from this element of trust. There's a wonderful story that was shared in an article by a Christine Hibbard, and she's a PhD clinical psychotherapist, and she was from Colorado, and she was on a raft trip, a 3-day raft trip with her husband, and she was on the front end of the lead of one of the 3 rafts. And anyway, in that early on in the trip, they hit some really violent rapids, and she was thrown out. And she had a life jacket on, but her husband was going to jump in after her, but the guide shouted and told him not to. But anyway, they were then in the midst of some continually dangerous, thunderous body of white water that were sweeping them. And it basically took her apart and distant from the rafts. And she was on her own. And for the next mile, she was fighting to keep from drowning. Even though she had this life jacket on, the raging water was sucking her under over and over again. And she was trying not to drown. And she tried to think about being able to survive amidst this series of the rocks and boulders and the whirlpools and the sinkholes that were pulling her down and swirling her. And anyway, she happened to remember a story where someone told her about surrendering to the flow of the river if one was tossed overboard. And so she started praying very hard to somehow get to this place of surrendering. But after a while, she knew she just didn't have the strength to come up one more time when it pulled her down. She had the realization that she was going to die. And there was a small voice inside of her then that said, "It'll be okay. It's okay to die. It's okay to die. And it's okay to become a part of the river as opposed to becoming apart from it. Go with this flow." And when she then totally surrendered and stopped struggling and stopped fighting, there was a great peace that came over her. And the next thing that she knew, she found herself lying on top of a big boulder that somehow she had been thrown on top of. And it was right up against, again, a huge drop-off and more water, but she was safe there, had been thrown on this boulder. And she realized there was no way she got there by herself, but it was really somehow divine grace that put her there. And she said the most important lesson that she learned from this whole amazing experience was simply basic trust and letting go. And that there is a trust that is kind of an unspoken, implicit trust that what is most favorable to you or to her will happen. What is most favorable. You're more than a physical body. You are an eternal being. Whatever it is that you're in the midst of, what is most favorable will happen to you. The universe is your friend. God hasn't stopped loving you. Okay? She learned this deep confidence that life is ultimately good, no matter what you're facing. And a new kind of trust kind of came to her. Not of a person or situation or something external, but trust within, an overwhelming sense that she could feel that she would always, always be okay. And so no matter whatever you face, whatever you're up against, whatever the odds, you will be okay. That's a powerful thing. And she stopped running away from what she didn't want to feel. And she began to risk being more vulnerable as a person and feeling and flowing with the river instead of fighting the river of life. And she now embraces every day with a sense of surrender and a sense of gratitude and a sense of the peace of knowing she'll always be okay. And it's a very special place when you get to that knowing. Yes, this is tough. Yes, this is difficult. Yes, this is threatening me. This is threatening my loved one. It'll all be okay. And Jesus said, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life." Don't be anxious about your life. Even, what you're going to eat or what you're going to drink. Don't be anxious about that body, not about your body. What you're going to put on it, even. And he talks about the birds of the air and the lilies of the field and how you are so much more value than they. You're going to be taken care of. You're going to be okay, And it's a message of trust. And so there is a sense of knowing that life over and over again brings you to situations. So what is it you're facing? What is it you're dealing with? What are you frightened or troubled about? You need to say to yourself, everything's going to be okay. I trust in God. I trust in the universe. I am more than all of this form, which I become attached to and worried so about. I'm an eternal spiritual being. And so changes and challenges happen. And as we go through the white river rapids of our life experiences, we have to realize that we are eternal souls. We've come to be a light. We have come to love. We have come to love for the love of it. We are swimming together in these rapids. in these challenging times, individually and collectively, whatever they might be. From the wisdom about the power of the river, the Hopi Indians shared at a conference in 2001 the following words of wisdom. To my fellow swimmers, there is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid. They will try to hold on to the shore, and they may be torn apart and suffer greatly. Know that the river has its destination. We must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, and keep our eyes open and our heads above the water. See who is there with you, and celebrate that this time in history we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment that we do, our spiritual growth, the journey, comes to a halt. The time of the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and even from your vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration, for we are the ones we have been waiting for. We're all here to learn to trust, to be a light. Everything's going to be okay. When you come to the fork in the road, be love for the love of it, because love and light is who you are. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.
Hi, I'm Howard Caesar, and I'm here to invite you to read my new book, 1 + 1 is 1. I believe the world is aching for oneness, and so is every person at a soul level. Oneness is an experience of the heart that transcends the mind. More than an intellectual concept, it's a feeling that expands our relationship with the divine and all its creation. It puts us in touch with life in all its forms in a deeper, more connected way. In the book, I explain what I mean by 1 + 1 is 1, for it's a tremendously important universal spiritual principle that we're all called to live. My intention with this book is to remind and inspire you, the reader, to realize that the soul's deepest longing is oneness, and that through its pages, to awaken, restore, and deepen your sense of oneness with the all that is. I hope you're led to pick up a copy and benefit from its contents.
When you visit Unity of Houston, you'll find a spiritual community, a church where you can connect and learn and grow with a progressive approach to Christianity. At Unity, we welcome you no matter what your beliefs. You'll find a teaching, loving, inspiring experience as we help each other be all we're created to be. Check us out. We'd love to have you. Find us online at unityhouston.org, and remember, life is meant to be good.